We are in Pro Day season approaching the 2021 NFL Draft. Joined by Paul Dottino, I am John Schmeelk. Of course, Paul, the gold standard of college football programs, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part 1, they're having 2 Pro Days this year, a laundry list of prospects. But let's start with Patrick Surtain II, son of former Dolphin cornerback Patrick Surtain. He talked to James Barmore of NFL Network about what his dad told him about preparing for the National Football League.
First off, he tells me, it's another level, a step level ahead. I just got to prepare the right way, mentally and physically, and focus on my assets, my technique, speed, getting stronger and faster in the weight room.
And Paul, Dad had to have been impressed by how his son did at his pro day. Checked in at 6'2", 208 pounds, built like a safety, tested in the 40-yard dash in the mid-4.4s, checked every box. This guy could be a top 10 pick.
John, I think pretty much it was unanimous going into this whole thing. He'd be a top 15 anyway. And then he goes and checks every single box you can check during the pro day. You have to think people are salivating and moving him up on the board in the 90-plus percentile in height, weight, size of hands, and in his broad jump. And as you said, 4.42 in his 40. Some people did not think he would run that fast.
And he did, and again, a top prospect in the draft. Let's stick on the defensive side of the ball, Paul. Christian Barmore, defensive tackle, large man, 6'4", 310 pounds, did well in the athletic testing. I'd be shocked if he wasn't the first defensive tackle off the board and could be the only first-round defensive tackle in the whole draft.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. Again, when you look at his tape, the production is there. This is not a projection guy. He did things at Alabama that certainly warrant a first-round pick. Then he goes and shows athleticism that maybe people weren't sure about during his pro day. That's a good sign for him.
Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. And Paul, let's start with the guys that didn't work out. Due to injury, no Jalen Waddle, no Najee Harris, the running back, and no DeVonta Smith, the Heisman Trophy-winning wide receiver. But DeVonta Smith was asked by James Barmore about what he weighed in at and what's been a bit of a controversy in NFL circles.
170. That's what I always been.
Yeah. So you feel like this is something that's kind of been overblown a little bit in a sense?
Yeah. Everybody just been trying to make a big deal out of it. I mean, everybody knew what it was, so I don't know why they try to make a big deal out of it.
Paul, we'll see if these guys do, in fact, work out at that second Alabama Pro Day. But DeVonta Smith, 170 pounds, 6 foot, not a common combination for wide receivers that succeed in the National Football League.
John, the way I look at it, I think he's going to be best served as a slot receiver because boundary receivers who are of a diminutive size like that, well, the odds are usually against them. So, if you really need a slot receiver, maybe you'll ignore all of those physical numbers and take him anyway.
Now, of course, you also have 2 Hall of Famers in Isaac Bruce and Marvin Harrison that do match those measurements, and they worked out. So there are ways to succeed with those type of measurements. Let's stick on the offensive side of the ball. Mac Jones, I thought he did a real nice job, threw the ball well, tried to show off his athleticism and throwing off platform.
Yeah, I think the only thing about Jones is that we've known going into this whole process that he didn't have the strongest arm of the quarterbacks who were going to be taken in this draft, certainly the ones who were going to be taken high. And I think Jones threw a nice deep ball with some good timing and touch and accuracy, but he doesn't quite have the zip on those balls.
All right, let's go to the big boys up front. The offensive line, Alabama has 3 guys that could be day 1 or 2 picks in this year's draft, Paul. First, you have Landon Dickerson, who's the big guard center combination. He could be a day 2 pick coming off an ACL. Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle. Some people think he may be a guard. And then the big guard, Deonte Brown, who lost some weight heading into the pro day. Give me the lowdown on these 3 fellas.
All right, well, let's start with Leatherwood because he showed some more athleticism than I think people expected. And I think that will be very interesting. He's the kind of guy who can get to the second level. And if you move him inside the guard, that could be very helpful for him in the run game.
And he played right tackle at Alabama primarily.
Correct. Now let's talk about Dickerson. Now, you mentioned the ACL, but John, he says he's going to be ready for the season.
By the way, he did snap for Jones when he did his throwing too, so he was out there doing something.
That's understood, but I think medical staffs will have more to say about him than the scouts will. And then we go to Deonte Brown. Now, from the time he was at the Senior Bowl to the time he went to the Pro Day, you mentioned he dropped 20 pounds. Now, that's important because the naysayers to him talk about the fact that sometimes he lost energy and his motor was a little bit weak. Well, if you're 360-something pounds, that's probably going to happen, John. That's a lot to carry around. They also questioned his balance a lot of times. Again, with the size that he was bringing to the field, is it any wonder that that could have been perceived as a negative?
I know we talked about a lot of Alabama guys. One other player from a different pro day I want to mention, Paul, before we say goodbye. Over to Purdue, wide receiver Rondale Moore checked in at only 5'7", but he ran a 4.29 on his 40. This guy is a real weapon on offense that can be used in a lot of different ways.
And that's the thing, because we're in this nouveau era in the National Football League where people just want speed, and speed requires, and a lot of times, small guys. Oh, we're going to use them in an end around. We're going to use them in the slot. We're going to use them on returns. We're going to do all kinds of crazy things with them, circle screens and whatnot. At some point, someone is going to think long and hard about taking him.
Also a 42.5-inch vertical, like a little Nate Robinson and Spud Webb going there for
exactly.
Rondale Moore.
Maybe the Knicks could use him.
Yeah, maybe they could. For Paul Dottino, I'm Josh Bell. Thanks for being with us as we continue our look at pro days leading into the 2021 NFL Draft.